The work we're doing, it's absolutely connected and built from the previous contributions of people who came before us who were organizing and supporting Black communities and making the work happen with or without an organization, with or without funding and resources. We're thinking very long-term, preventative, built environment, not necessarily reacting to crisis. We're thinking, how do we prevent crisis? How do we help people thrive in place? How do we help people have stronger neighborhoods where they can live and reach their full potential?
Welcome to the Community Center for Moringa Urbanism, a show about bringing people together to lift each other up and to celebrate shared histories, cultures, and pathways to a strong future. I'm Kyler. I'll be your host for today. I'm an architect and design communicator based out of Oklahoma City. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest who will be helping us to answer the question, how do we build places that not only meet people's basic needs, but beyond that, actually reflect the people who live and gather there and truly begin to foster a sense of belonging and shared ownership? Vanessa Morrison, welcome to the show. Could you start us out by telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. Hi, Kyler. Thank you for having me back. It's so awesome to be in conversation with you again and to be on your platform. I am, let me try to simplify it, a urban planner, and I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO of Open Design Collective, and we are a nonprofit design firm that supports the social and spatial needs of Black communities through the tools of architecture, planning, cultural preservation, and design. And so we do a lot of that work in Northeast Oklahoma City, our historically and still predominantly Black community, and through historic preservation projects, planning initiatives, community organizing and building. We're really trying to reimagine how we use these tools to not only address inequities and challenges that have been systemically impacting communities for generations on end, but how do we leverage them as solutions to help people thrive in place? And so really excited to do this work. I'm a resident of Northeast OKC as well. And it's just awesome with all of the transformation happening across our city, specifically in Northeast OKC, to be a part of this work and to work with my neighbors every day to see how we can strengthen the built environment where people can live their best life. So a little bit about what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. We actually talked back in spring of 2023, and I made a video for the channel that was focused a lot on the impacts of urban renewal in Northeast OKC and the South of 8th plan that you guys were working
Yes.
on at the time. So I guess, first of all, if anybody is listening and hasn't watched that video, go check it out. I'll put some links somewhere. But can you give us an update on the South of 8th project and how that is all progressing now that it's been implemented?
Sure. Yeah. And this is actually such a timely conversation that we're having because we are now at the 2-year anniversary point of the South of 8th plan. And when we talked originally, we were still very much in the thick of that plan transitioning into being formalized and, really, I would say, memorialized in a lot of ways. And now we can look back, now that we're 2 years post the project, and see some very tangible outcomes and some work that's been done in great thanks to all the community members who contributed to that project. And so South of 8, just a quick recap, was a master plan initiative that was commissioned by the Oklahoma City Urban Renewal Authority that still owns a pretty substantial amount of property in Northeast OKC as a result of urban renewal practices that took place in the 60s throughout the 70s. And urban renewal, what we call for short OCURA, was really committed to seeing how they can reckon with that history of urban renewal and the destruction of the Black community and do what they could in present day to release that property from their ownership in a way that will support community goals and really help add to and advance the revitalization efforts for the entire community. So we really want to thank and commend the Urban Renewal Authority for taking on this effort and entrusting us in this role to lead that master planning initiative. And so from 2021 to 2023, 2 years, we led a master planning initiative that engaged with over 400 community members of Northeast OKC to create a vision for how this area can thrive in the future and what are the built environment strategies that we can start implementing to make sure that people, again, can thrive in place and that we're not just thinking about revitalization absent of the people who live there and the culture and the legacies that are so interconnected to this area. So really proud of that work. We're super grateful to everyone who contributed to that that process. There's a lot of engagement and conversations that have been happening on the East Side. And it's a full-time job to be engaged and participatory in a community that's going through so much change. And so if it wasn't for all the community members who contributed, that project would not have been possible. And so now, again, 2 years after, we've seen a lot of great change and hope to see more. And some of those I can highlight are, for one, the master plan has really been so instrumental in cultivating additional resources, financial resources through grants to help execute some of the priorities from that plan. And so one of the priorities I'll call out is the really high importance of the community to preserve and protect historic and surviving monuments. There's a lot of the historic fabric of the community that was destroyed and lost through urban renewal and other destructive practices. And so there's not a ton of buildings that still stand today that were historically significant to the community. And one of them being the Jewel Theater, which was built in 1931 by Mr. Percy and Miss Hathel James, a couple that was very entrepreneurial and actually owned multiple businesses on Northeast 4th Street, which was the commercial corridor lifeline of the community. They built that theater, and it was one of the few buildings that actually survived the urban renewal era. And so it is so important to the community, a place that represents joy, entertainment, artistry, community, especially during the era of Jim Crow, where there were not a lot of places that Black folks could go to outside of the East Side area, or were even legally allowed to be outside of that area, to be able to do life and have these joyful experiences. So the Jewel Theater was more than just a theater. It was a community space that was so integral to people's sense of joy and community. And it's so important to the community to this day, generations back, and even younger folks, that that space is protected and that it can stand as a relic, as a monument that speaks to the power and history and legacy of this community. And so thanks to, in large part, of the South of Eighth work and working alongside the Jewel Theater Foundation, which is a nonprofit that stewards that space, and so many additional local partners and collaborators, we've been able to raise well over $2 million at this point to revitalize that theater. It's been vacant since 1970. It structurally was vulnerable, very vulnerable. And the organization, the Jewel Theater Foundation, now was working very hard to bring in resources. But when you're a small organization and you're working with a site that's sitting in so much vacancy, for funders, that can be seen as a risk. You know, funders oftentimes don't want to just fund something just because it sounds like a good idea. They want to see that it's going to have some sort of substantial return on their investment and have a community benefit. And so trying to maintain the building and build funder relationships and build capacity and run this whole space was difficult and challenging, but we were able to come together and use that South of Eighth work to make the argument that this area is going through a revitalization and transformative phase. The Jewel Theater can be a catalyst in this whole ecosystem of entrepreneurship and business activity that's coming back to the area. And we do want to think about historic preservation, again, not just for memory's sake, but as part of a tool to revitalize a community. We could use and leverage historic sites to be economic drivers, and the Jewel Theater absolutely has that potential, like it did historically. And so we've been able to raise well over $2 million for that project, and that's not all we need. We need more, but just the momentum and the progress has been amazing, especially because the building has been vacant and sitting since 1970. We've also been able to secure some federal funding, and the one that we're really excited about, but it's kind of in a weird space because it's frozen, I think. Hopefully it's not terminated, but we were able to secure over $1 million grant from the Department of Transportation, because the South of Eighth work, we really were able to understand the devastation that I-235 caused in the community, the building of I-235 through the Northeast OKC community. And I think from just a high level understanding, most people can see the harm within that. But when you sit down and you're talking to residents and you're listening to what that experience was like for them to be a part of this very well-connected, beautiful, thriving community, and then to be displaced and to lose homes and businesses and institutions and schools and these spaces that were so important to them, and then having to leave the area, you really understand at a deeper level how that highway was so destructive, not just to the physical environment, but to the social community and the cultural community that was so strong on the East Side. And so being able to understand and translate that information into the South of Eighth work and being able to reference a report like South of Eighth in a federal grant application is very competitive for a funder to see, oh my gosh, like they've talked to over 400 people. They've done this spatial analysis and this historical analysis. They understand how these community priorities can actually be implemented into these spatial interventions that can address these harms that have been done. That helped us secure that funding. And it was for a planning grant to see how a trail, a multimodal trail, could reconnect Deep Deuce all the way throughout the East Side, helping reconnect all those historically Black neighborhoods all the way up to the Adventure District. And not just, again, thinking about it just through connectivity, but could this be a catalyst for economic development? There's a lot of cities that have amazing precedent in showing how trails can be economic development tools, from having trail site businesses, from bringing people and visitors into a community that otherwise would just be driving through and want to stop and spend time and spend money in businesses. There's so many benefits to these trails in addition to healthier outcomes and in healthier and more well communities. We know that there's a lot of health disparities that people are experiencing in Oklahoma. We rank very high with a lot of these challenges, and a lot of that can be attributed to the lack of pedestrian friendly infrastructure that people have to be connected to nature and to walk around their communities and to be in community. So these opportunities like trails can really address so many needs in an area. And we were able to use the South of Eighth report, all that community feedback, all that research to make an argument that this trail would not only address the highway injustice, but also could help support so many of the needs in this community. And we also got a $500,000 EPA grant to address environmental justice issues. Unfortunately, that grant was terminated. But again, being able to reference a report, show community priorities, feedback, consensus around ideas has been a very powerful tool in being able to cultivate resources. Another thing I'll mention, the city of Oklahoma City was a great partner in that work, and they actually have used the South of Eighth report to inform regulatory tools like zoning. The zoning code update is something that the city has been working on for years, and I just talked to one of the city planners, and they said they're very, very close to getting that finalized, so we're excited. But they use the South of Eighth report to address the zoning infrastructure in the area to allow for the type of development that people want to see. A big conversation in South of Eighth was, how do we start diversifying housing typologies so people can age in place? We can have aspects like ADUs where people can take care of their elders and not be disconnected from them, where they can rent out their ADUs and have passive income to support their financial needs. There's just so many benefits to ADUs, and the city of Oklahoma City has used our report to implement updates to the zoning code to allow this regulatory framework to support development needs instead of being a barrier, which historically zoning has been a big barrier for responsive, flexible development that addresses real-time community needs. And they also, with the passing of the ADU ordinance earlier this year, they used the South of Eighth report to help argue that, hey, there's consensus and support around people having these housing options in their community. So we're really excited from a resource cultivation perspective, a policy perspective, and just how it's built community and partnerships with people who were not historically talking. OU Health Sciences Center, that has a pretty difficult past with the community, especially because it's had its own urban renewal plan. They are now engaged with East Side leaders in ways that they were not before. It's helped address this need for more institutional partnerships and support with people who are neighbors to the community but haven't really been involved in the community. And now they understand aspects of these neighborhoods that they didn't necessarily know either. I met so many people who work at OU Health Sciences Center who didn't even know about that urban renewal history. And now they're having conversations about, how can we be better neighbors and address some of these needs? And also knowing that it's going to help the work that we do and having healthier, stronger communities. So it's been a lot. It's been so fun to celebrate and reflect on all of the change that South of Eighth has helped catalyze, and we want to keep the work going.
That's awesome. All of these different pieces, it kind of becomes like a backbone to allow this growth to have something that it's based on. So that's
Right.
really cool.
Thank you.
So the Jewel Theater, I kind of found out about this after our interview and I started putting the pieces together and I actually kind of spotlighted it in that video that I made.
Mhm.
How is that project going? What have you learned through that process and how do you see it coming together?
Yeah, that has been one of the most amazing projects to be a part of, especially, I'm from Norman. I grew up going to church on the East Side, definitely have connections in a lot of different ways, but I didn't grow up on the East Side. And so a part of this work that's been so rewarding for me is really understanding the fuller story of what this community was about, what it built, what it created, despite that forced isolation during the era of segregation, despite all of the systemic inequities that have impacted the area. I've been able to learn so much about this community and the spaces that are important to these experiences, and the Jewel Theater being one of them. Something that I would say that has been, I would think, very transformative for me as a professional is understanding how these historic spaces, again, can be a part of the economic revitalization of the community. I think a lot of people think that preservation is just, it's not founded in this process. They don't understand the connection that preservation has and revitalizing a community, and they think it's just all about saving old buildings or just holding on to memory. And it's so much more expansive than that. And just understanding how other cities and other communities have been able to leverage their historic assets to help activate these entrepreneurial ecosystems, these cultural, creative ecosystems has been really fascinating. And I believe in the power of the Jewel Theater being able to do the same thing. And we can look back in history and see how originally it was that anchor in the community. We may never see the area be necessarily revitalized like exactly how it was originally historically in the early 1900s, but how can we look at those historic models and bring them into real time and have them exist in this current age that we live in? And so I'm really excited about how the Jewel Theater can be saved and reactivated, but also add to this whole neighborhood and help support revitalization and the support of other areas in the community. So really excited about that. We're wrapping up phase one, which was all about stabilization and making sure that the building is structurally sound. And so we replaced the roof, the exterior brick was repaired and restored. We're working with a really great group called Building Culture, who is leading that effort. And so they specialize in historic brick. And it was really important for us that we didn't try to make the building look like a brand new construction, but that we restored the historic beauty of the space and of the brick. And they did such a beautiful job with that. And then now we're wrapping up the front facade work, the tile work, and the doors and things of that nature. And then that will complete phase one. And then phase two will be getting the building to occupancy, where the Jewel Theater Foundation will be able to start doing programming in the space, which we're really, really excited about and working very hard to continue fundraising for. We got another round of funding coming in from the Mellon Foundation and other funders. And so we're really excited about this. And again, it will get the building to where it could be occupied. And so we'll get electrical in there, ADA accessibility all the way around, restrooms, because right now it's just kind of sitting as a box, but phase two will get the infrastructure inside and the ADA accessibility work done where people can be in there and actually enjoy this cultural programming that I know the Jewel Theater Foundation is really excited to activate. So still a ways to go, but I think people see the power in how the Jewel Theater can be, again, this catalyst for the whole entire neighborhood. And so we have a lot of support behind it and a great team that we're working with to get it done.
That's really exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing it all come together over the next several months or
Mhm.
however long. So, last time we talked, you mentioned Blackspace, Oklahoma, and kind of touched a little bit on what that is. And I'm curious how that has evolved, what's going on with it now.
Yeah, Blackspace has been such a life-changing community for me as a Black woman urban planner who's extremely underrepresented in the field nationally and especially here locally. And to be connected to a community that brings in that representation and a cultural approach to how we do this work has helped me in the work of open design. Blackspace Oklahoma actually helped us establish open design and really think about, again, how do we reimagine these tools in a way that addresses community needs, addresses inequities, and really goes beyond the traditional confines of how urbanism has been practiced over, decades of time. And so Blackspace Oklahoma is we call it a cousin. We don't use the term affiliate or chapter. We call ourselves cousins, kind of playing on a cultural connection that's really significant in a lot of communities, and especially in the Black community. Your cousins are like your best friends, your first best friend, things of that nature. And so Oklahoma is a cousin group of the network. Blackspace Urbanist Collective is headquartered in New York City. And then there's the cousin group Oklahoma, which I co founded, Chicago, and Indianapolis. And so we're all doing this collective work and just supporting each other and reimagining how we practice this work. And again, that was a stepping stone into the formation of open design and has been, again, such a amazing just source of support and ideation and collaboration ever since. And the Blackspace Urbanist Collective is actually transitioning into a different structure, which is really exciting. And they're moving away from these cousin group type of organizing into really being an accelerator that's dedicated to supporting Black urbanist ventures. So I'm really excited to share because this is new since the last time we talked, but I'm actually in the inaugural cohort of Studio Kin, which is the entity that the accelerator is being operated through. And there are 7 other practitioners in the cohort. And it's really, I love it because there's a lot of incubator business sort of development programs out there, but the work we're doing, it's absolutely connected and built from the previous contributions of people who came before us who were organizing and supporting Black communities and making the work happen with or without an organization, with or without funding and resources. But the way we're practicing is very new, and a lot of people don't have, even from a business model perspective, a lot of people don't have that expertise, and then it's certainly not from like a practitioner perspective, because there's not a lot of people who are running these incubators and understand urbanism and the different types of business models that we're working with, because it's very unique. And so to be in this accelerator in a community of people who are doing very similar work, who understand urbanism, who understand we got to run a business. What does that take? But we're also structured as a nonprofit. So how do we navigate this landscape? It's been so helpful. And in the accelerator, we have a business coach. We're going to be able to do a pitch night in Brooklyn in February to share about our platforms and our work across a national network of people and funders and supporters. And, I feel so fortunate to be doing this work in Oklahoma, especially in this era of time that we're in, when there's, again, so much transformation and so much change happening. I see how in bigger cities it's probably harder to get involved with influencing change because there's so much bureaucracy, there's so many people, there's so much competition. We're here. I feel like if you want to get involved, you can. If you want to do something, you can. And it's just a matter of meeting the right people and being in the right rooms for you to be able to do the work that you want to do. And so I love that about being here in Oklahoma. But with that, being in this very niche type of work, there's, again, not a lot of people who understand it. And even from a funding perspective, it's so new. I think when your funders are used to funding a certain type of philanthropy, and we don't really fit neatly into that box because we're thinking very long-term, preventative, built environment, not necessarily reacting to crisis. We're thinking, how do we prevent crisis? How do we help people thrive in place? How do we help people have stronger neighborhoods where they can live and reach their full potential? And a lot of people are not used to funding that way. And we're so grateful for the funders that we do partner with, because I do believe there are many funders here that are thinking innovatively and preventatively and wanting to fund more creative ventures and organizations. But still, you really need a national network to do this work, because the philanthropic capacity here is limited. And within that limitation, there's only a certain group of people that want to fund this type of work and get it. So being able to be connected to Black Space has helped us build these national relationships where we can get a Mellon grant, where we can get a National Trust for Historic Preservation grant, in ways that we just didn't have access to those relationships before. So Blackspace Oklahoma will be dissolving as Blackspace Urbanist Collective is restructuring, but I'm really excited because I love how adaptable the collective has been. It wasn't ever created to be this permanent fixture that never changed. It's literally responding to the needs that it's seeing across Black practitioners in the community. And so this original thought of let's build the national network and now let's transition into supporting people who are doing this work and running businesses that need this supportive infrastructure. I'm just really proud of how they've been able to adapt and shift. And that, yeah, Oklahoma is in this cohort and we're learning a lot and bringing a lot of thought leadership and resources to Oklahoma City as a result of that. Yeah,
That's really
of the
cool.
collective. It's been such a great community in my life.
Now, I think I noticed. So I was following Blackspace on Instagram. I think I noticed that Instagram account became the Blacktown Homecoming
Yes.
Instagram. So I'm curious about that, and I'd like to hear more about what that is and what the goals are there and what's happening with that.
Yes, I got a couple of inbox messages too, like, "Who are y'all and what is this new page about?" I was like, "Ooh, I probably should have, I don't know, asked people before I did that." I kind of felt bad, but with that transition, with Black Space dissolving, Oklahoma, Black Space Urbanist Collective is here to stay, but the cousin groups are dissolving during this restructuring process. We didn't want to like lose that audience. And, there's a lot of people who follow that page who are interested in this work and excited about it. And so we're like, like, how do we keep the online presence that we have and not just get rid of it because Blackspace Oklahoma is no longer? And so we are working on the Blacktown Homecoming Project, which is a grant funded project from the State Historic Preservation Office. And we're working with the towns of Taft, Renniesville, and Tallahassee, 3 of the 13 existing Black towns. And it was a really cool proposal because it's all about this work in reckoning and highlighting the historical aspects of the Black towns. And I think that work is so needed and beautiful. And there's a lot of people who have been doing this work for many, many years, from mapping the towns, from doing the tours of these communities to signage, wayfinding, historical markers. Like there's been a lot of amazing people who have led this work for many, many years. And so when we saw the grant call, we were like, okay, we don't want to necessarily duplicate what's already been happening, but how do we build off of, again, that's really a big part of our practice. How do we build off of history and contributions before us? And so we propose, and our project is all about working with these 3 towns sort of as a pilot program or project, if you will, to see how cultural tourism can be a revitalization strategy that can help support these communities. Many of them are very, very low in population, 100 or less. They're small. There's been so much land annexed out of the communities. So the communities are very small geographically. There are people who are living there and leading change and revitalization every day, but are also limited in the resources that they have to do this work. And so we wanted to think, okay, we know tours have been done before, but like, how can we maybe elevate the tour experience to really think about ongoing cultural tourism strategies that can support these communities, bring revenue into the towns, and help them incrementally revitalize and rebuild over time. And so we have 3 parts of that project. One is we're going to be taking folks on a tour in April 24th through April 26th. That weekend, we're going to be taking folks to Taft, Tallahassee, and Renniesville. And one aspect of the work is that we're not just going to the communities and hearing stories and leaving. We're going to be using funds from the grant to activate these towns. And so the Blacktown Homecoming brand and naming, if you will, came from our research and realizing how so many of these Black towns had these very strong Black education institutions. Tallahassee actually had a Black college, Kipper Davis College. And so understanding that theme, we want to do a play off of that and do this kind of Black homecoming HBCU vibe to play into the educational legacy of each of these communities, but also invite people to come home and come back to their roots. And a lot of people have actually deep connections to Black towns and some don't even realize it. And so we wanted to play off of that asset and that importance of the educational legacies of these communities and bring people back to them. And so we are going to be taking folks out to the towns and then using again the grant funding to activate them. And so Right now, we're in the planning phase of the April tours, and we're already identifying entrepreneurs. Who's a caterer in your community? Who is the event space property owner, venue operator? How do we make sure that we're renting from them, that we're hiring local? We want to do a gift bag. We want to source items from people who are making jams and candles and doing this beautiful makers type of work in the community. And then also being intentional about not just buying products and supplies for our project, but things that can be used on an ongoing basis to support them doing this work independently. So part of this homecoming theme, we're gonna do again an activation in each town, and Tallahassee will be the first stop. And they have a very strong basketball team youth program. And so we want to buy a mascot suit. So we can like do this pep rally type of experience to kick off the tours, but then they can use that on an ongoing basis for their sporting events, for any other tours they want to do. So I think that's what makes us a little different is again, leaning on and building from these beautiful tour experiences that people have led before us, but adding a layer of that to really bring in resources to activate these entrepreneurs and these cultural producers in a way that helps them do this and duplicate this work over time. We're also going to be producing a sort of what we're calling a cultural tourism economic development playbook. So we're going to be documenting the entire process from start to finish, the findings, doing some market analysis to be a tool for them to use on an ongoing basis for the work. And then our storytelling component, in addition to what will be happening at the tours, is a social media page because a lot of these towns don't have an online presence. And so we want to help bring visibility. And I think it's amazing what SHPO has done, and library, archival type of folks have done a really great job in mapping and documenting the Blacktown history. But that's not really how people access information in 2025. A lot of people are going on Instagram, social media, and using apps to get information. And so we're exploring through this Instagram and Facebook page, how do we bring visibility to all of that great archival work and also document and tell the story of what's happening today? Because a lot of times when those towns are being highlighted, it's always in the historical context and timeline of these towns. But there's a lot of amazing women and men and families and young professionals who have moved back to these communities who are working with little to almost no resources to rebuild and have been able to do some amazing things. And so, how do we also spotlight that living legacy, the historic, but also the living work that's happening in our social media? Our intention is to celebrate that online and gain interest and help build visibility for these communities beyond the life of the project.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm excited to see how that progresses as well. I'm curious if you have any other projects going on or things you've been interested in recently that you'd be interested in spotlighting here.
Yeah, there's so much. One project that we're really excited about is the Threatt filling station in Luther. It was the only Black rest stop, or documented anyway, rest stop along the entire Route 66 route from Illinois to California. And again, talking about this era of Jim Crow where people were driving through and traveling through sundown towns and very dangerous areas, especially in Oklahoma. It was such a critical safe haven of a space for people to be able to stop, pull up their cars. They also had camping grounds where people could stay overnight. They had a restaurant. They had a baseball diamond. They had a sort of celebration type of venue space in addition to the actual station. So it really was this whole insulated community that was a safe haven for Black travelers, but was also a very inclusive space as well because everyone was welcome there. And what's so amazing about this project is that the Threatt family who came to Oklahoma in the late 1800s and, activated this whole site, the family still owns the property. And so we're working with the descendants of the patriarch of the family who started this whole ecosystem of a safe haven for Black travelers. And so it's amazing to work with these individuals and to hear the family stories and what they were able to steward there. And they were all kids when the Threatt station was at its high point, but still just to be able to work with the family and understand what's important for them from a storytelling perspective, from a preservation perspective, and how do we make sure that we're doing what we can to honor that history has been so fun. again, learning a fuller story about Oklahoma. It's awesome. And so we are working with them. The centennial for Route 66 is in 2026 next year. And so a lot of these projects along the route, and we have the largest stretch of the route in Oklahoma. So all of these small towns and projects are working very, very hard to get ready for what's going to be this influx of global tourism coming through Oklahoma. Working with the family, we're going to be doing this. Essentially, it's an adaptive reuse project, and we're transitioning the station into an interpretive center so people can stop at the station and learn about the history in a really fun, interactive, and explorative way, and be able to stop at the Threatt Station as one of the destinations along the route in Oklahoma. And so, super excited working with the exhibition designer based in Brooklyn who does a lot of Black cultural institution exhibition design in partnership with our architectural services and planning services and the Threatt family's lived expertise and, familial knowledge has it's just been such a beautiful project to work on. So we're excited to get that work done and open in 2026 so people can learn more about the history and actually get to physically stop and see and experience this amazing living monument that the family built and led and operated for many years despite all of the challenges that came with that, especially in the earlier time period.
Yeah, that's cool. Actually, that project came up in another interview.
Oh, cool.
I'm excited that you're involved with that.
Mhm.
I'm
Right.
also just excited to see all of these things happening in Oklahoma City and throughout the state.
Yes.
And yeah, do you have any sort of, I guess, final thoughts for the listeners or anything about how things are going, what things are happening and what maybe is next?
Yeah, well, I can share, what's next. It's been amazing just building and ideating about open design and how we can continue to be this adaptive, responsive resource partner for community projects in supporting the built environment. And it just feels like it's been such an accelerated timeline because we started off almost 10 years ago doing the storytelling work, and then the pandemic hit, and then there was this heightened awareness of systemic racism and a lot of interest nationally of how we can really address these problems, these generational problems that have been so devastating to communities. And so we went from doing small projects, then this lull and pause to now this ramping up of all of these opportunities. And we're working really hard to see, how do we continue to be, again, supportive in this work, this transformation that's happening in our city. And so as a organization, something that we're looking forward to next year is thinking about our model and how do we continue to be able to bring in the resources to do this work. And are we going to be more place-based, localized? Do we want to be more national? Is it a mix of the two? And so we actually are onboarding some new board members to the organization that are going to help us ideate and create a vision for that. So I'm really excited about that and thinking about the potential of what open design can continue to do this work. Yeah, just getting these projects what they need to sustain and revitalize and just continuing to be a part of all of this change that's happening in our city is I would say what we're looking forward to. We still have a lot of work to do and a lot of things to accomplish, but it's an exciting time to think about open design 2.0 and how we can continue to be a good partner and source of resources for the needs in our community.
That's awesome. If people want to follow along with your work and find out more, where would you direct them?
Yes, we're on Instagram at open_design co. And we're on Facebook as well. So we're trying to get our social media channels up so people can follow us on there. We're also on YouTube as well, just Open Design Collective, and posting video content on there. We're actually doing a video series to reflect on South of 8th and its outcomes. So if anyone wants to hear more about that, we're having these conversations with some key stakeholders that were a part of that project. And so they can check us out on YouTube as we upload those videos. I just uploaded a conversation that we had with Councilman Kamal Pennington of Ward 7, who was very involved with South of 8th. And so that episode is up. We also have a website, opendesignco.org, that we try to keep as updated as possible so people can learn about what we're doing. But yeah, our social media, you can find us on there, and we love interacting with people and sharing stories and information. We get inboxed often of people saying, "Hey, did you know this about the theater?" Or "My grandfather grew up here," or "My uncle has pictures of this space. Can I send it to you?" So we love to be able to interact, not just show what we're doing and highlight the work that we're doing, but to interact with folks who want to be a part of the work as well. So social media is a great place to follow along.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Vanessa, for joining me. And I think it's been a really good conversation. So look forward to seeing what comes next.
Thank you, Kyler. Thank you for having me back.
Hey, it's me, Kyler. If you enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to give the show a like, rating, subscription, or whatever kind of nice feedback you can provide on whatever platform you're watching or listening from. If you'd like to join our community to stay up to date or to discuss anything you heard in today's show, consider joining the Oringo Urbanism Discord server. And finally, if you'd like to support the work of Oringo Urbanism directly, you can do so over on Patreon. Until next time.